Okay, we'll get started. We'll call to order the November 8th meeting of the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission. A couple announcements to start, which is that tonight I will be acting as chairman, and Chairman Dan Drake will be participating remotely due to geographic distance, and therefore all votes will be taken by roll call. This meeting is also being both audio and video recorded. With that, we will start with the review and approval of the agenda. Are there any questions or comments?
No.
Hearing none, we'll consider that approved by unanimous consent. The minutes for annual town meeting are still pending, and we have draft minutes for October 11th regular meeting as well as the workshop meeting. Are there any questions or comments regarding those minutes?
I've got a couple of typos in there, but...
We can handle those through staff.
Okay.
Thanks. So hearing no other concerns, we'll consider those adopted by unanimous consent. We have to ratify the warrants of October 19th and November 2nd. Is there any comments or regarding those two warrants? Hearing not, I would entertain a motion for the ratification of those two warrants.
I'll make that motion. I'll second.
Roll call vote. Commissioner Buscarin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Topham?
Aye.
Commissioner Planzer?
Aye.
Commissioner Drake? Chairman Jake?
Aye.
And Vice Chair votes aye as well. Unanimous consent. Is there any public comment for matters not on the agenda tonight? Hearing none, we'll move forward to pending matters, and we'll turn it over to Manager Rafter for the three items that are listed on the agenda.
Thank you. We have the formal use defense site. The Army Corps of Engineers has accepted our comments on the draft remedial investigation plan. They've also indicated that the site should be available by March of 2017, and recently we just received, if you will, concurrence from the DEP also on the plan. So we're moving forward with that, and NOAA has some meetings set up to continue that process moving along. The general fund repayment, there's no change, but we've had some discussions, and we're going to be circling back with the finance director. He had some questions regarding a previous year's subsidy that the FAA was asking questions about, so we're going to hopefully work with him to get the answers back to FAA on that. On the McGrath Family Trust request a sublease, you have before you tonight I should have a copy of the sublease as well as a subordination, consent to subordination agreement with Allies Air for the freight hangar. The original draft of that was, I will say, very cumbersome, and we've worked closely with Allies, going back and forth with a number of language changes to the consent to subordination, and I believe we have an agreement that works for both parties at this time. So that's for your consideration. And Allies is here this evening, I think, if you have any questions.
Would you like to address the commission, or just here for questions?
Please, we would like to address.
If you could go to the microphone, please, and introduce yourself for the record.
Thank you very much. My name's Eric Goddard. If I'll preface myself and let you all know that once we present and answer any questions you might have, we will leave. So we hope we're not disruptive. I'll be taking that guy Bobby with me too. My name, as I said, is Eric Goddard, and I am a partner in Allies Air and Allies Freight, and the operations manager is Bob Shields. He's with me tonight, and really I just wanted to introduce myself. Bob is and has been the guy that's been on the ground, mostly with Mr. Rafter and the Hyannis Airport, and I would like to turn it over to Bob to give you a brief summary of what we hope to accomplish in the future with your cooperation in Hyannis.
Sounds good, thanks.
Thanks, Eric. My name's Bob Shields, and I've been volunteering for the town of Nantucket via Nantucket Allies since 2012, basically looking to help the local community.
Mr. Starr, will you ask Mr. Shields to speak up if he could a little bit, please?
Sure. Again, my name is Bob Shields, Robert Shields Jr., and I've been volunteering for the town of Nantucket via Nantucket Allies since 2012. And when Island Airlines went out of business, my old friend Bill McGrath of 25 years, I called him, and basically we jumped on the bandwagon to try to restore service for both passengers and for freight. So that said, we entered into a 20-year lease on the Hyannis facility, the old Island Airlines facility, which holds the freight room that was used for decades. And we also have a sublease and the consent agreement, which is before you tonight, for final approval so that we can move forward to start to provide freight handling services for the various carriers that are local to the town of Nantucket and to the Cape, that serve both the community of Nantucket and the local businesses of Nantucket. So to reiterate, we're offering freight handling services. We're not going to be carrying freight. We do have another company called Allies Air, which is a charter membership club, which we will have in operation, I would think, in the spring of 2017. And it's an on-demand charter club, which only goes between Hyannis and Nantucket. So at that point, we will start to also carry freight. But for now, we're going to be offering the freight handling services only until that time. And our mission, like I said, is really to serve the airport, the local island community, the local businesses, and to help the freight carriers and restore, like I said, the services that we've lost, and at the same time keep the prices, the freight prices, lower for the community and the local businesses. I will say that as of right now, I've had 2 meetings with FedEx Corporation, and they are very interested in operating out of this shared, engaging our freight handling services at that facility on a shared basis with the other carriers while they transition into a permanent facility. And they anticipate that time will be approximately 12 to 18 months based on my conversations with them today. I have had several meetings with the other carriers, and as you know, some of them are looking at all different alternatives. And so we have ongoing negotiations with them as well. I wanted to just touch on some of the points about the benefits of our service and why our service is going to benefit the airport, the community, and the small businesses, as well as the carriers that are currently carrying the freight. Most importantly, I would say that, by having a cooperative overhead situation, based on our research right now, the current freight volume is not even $20,000 a month, and based on that, on those sales figures, which I've gotten, and based on our analysis, those sales are not sufficient to support even one single facility, and I think we all know from history that the most important thing is to set everybody up for success, which is why we feel our business model is going to do just that. By having multiple carriers sharing our, working for us providing those services, what it does is it lowers everyone's overhead so that even the smaller carriers can actually make a profit, which will help to ensure that they don't fail. In addition, by having multiple carriers, if in the unlikely event that one of them did go out of business, there would still be other carriers in business that would sustain the operations, and we would not be subject to what happened with the failing of Island Airlines. Also, we have, let's see, excuse me one second. Also, by having multiple carriers and on various schedules and various costs, it provides a higher level of service and more frequent deliveries. So you're not relying on any one carrier to do, if it's going to be one an hour or one every 15 minutes or or twice a day or 3 times a day. So by having multiple carriers through this cooperative, so to speak, it provides a higher level of service for our local community residents as well as our local businesses because of the frequency and the velocity of the deliveries. Basically, a higher level of service. Also, by utilizing this lower overhead, as you know, in business, if you've been involved in business, that any of these costs have to be passed on to the consumer. So by having a shared overhead situation where everyone's overhead is lower, it translates into hopefully, possibly, people could still charge more, obviously, but for the most part, we expect, based on our research and analysis and experience, that it's going to result in lower costs of handling freight, which again would benefit the local community of Nantucket and the local businesses. Also, with that increased velocity and success, by having the lower overhead, we can have joint advertising programs to drive consumers to one central facility. Cooperative advertising, as you know, advertising is a big part of any expense, and by doing cooperative advertising, we can leverage, the various different clients that we serve by generating more traffic. And obviously, the more sales that we generate, the more revenue it's going to be for the town and the airport as well, which is a benefit. Also, the current facility, as it was designed by the airport, it's my understanding that it was designed to provide the highest level of service to the community and the highest level of operational service in regards to minimum standards and various other factors that go into making the freight facility very efficient and safe, and all the other various factors that go into the minimum standards of operations. And it's my understanding, based on my discussions with people that are in the industry, as well as people that have had experience with this airport for many, many years, that some of the other sites that are currently being considered may not supply or provide the same efficiencies in regards to for the customers, the community, as well as for the aircraft mobility and moving around the airport facility. So that's another benefit in that, all of this, all these resources went into building that original freight facility so that it is going to be working at an optimal level. So obviously anything that was outside of that would vary from that, potentially. And that's really it. We're ready to, we're pulling up, we've spent almost 3 months now getting building permit for the Hyannis Freight Room because we are going to be offering on-demand charter services to our members through the Allies Air Charter Club. We expect to have our permit hopefully tomorrow in Hyannis, and we expect to start construction and be in full operation on or about January 1st of 2017. And our intention is that we're ready, we want to open both at the same time, obviously, because, we're only providing these facilities in Hyannis and Nantucket, and that's over the decades of operation that had transpired over the years. That is really proven to be it's worked over the years. So we think it's important to have both facilities open at the same time. So at this point, I'd like to thank the board. I'd like to ask if anyone has any questions. I'd be more than happy to answer them if I can. And otherwise, I would ask for you to approve the consent agreement so that we can get started.
Thanks for your presentation. We'll have a discussion with the manager and the commission, and then if there's any questions, we'll let you know.
Thank you very much.
Ask a few questions. You're not in business.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask a couple of questions.
Yep. Go ahead, Dan.
Mr. Shields, are you there?
I am.
Obviously, from the airport's point of view, and I preface my questions and comment with this, from the airport's point of view, we want to see as much competition as possible. And we want to see the best service we can possibly get. May I assume from your comments about lowering overhead that basically you're planning to apply on a sort of a pro rata basis the cost of running this operation and some reasonable margin for Allied?
That is correct.
Or is each of the other users going to have to pay a fixed cost?
The way our business model is designed, sir, is that depending on the needs and the velocity of freight that each independent client of ours has, they will be a sub-tenant of Allies Air Freight LLC, and they will be designated a certain amount of square footage and would have a sublease. So there would be an additional sublease from Allies Air Freight LLC to the various other carriers, and they would have a certain square footage allocation as well as use of the other common areas. And based on the cost of that, it would be balanced in regards to how much of the capacity each client uses. That would be used to determine what their costs would be. So that way it would be fair. So a small operator that needed a very small amount of space would pay much, much less than, let's say, a FedEx.
Putting aside your profit margin, which is your business.
Yes.
I mean, if one carrier brought in 10%, would they pay 10% of the cost of operation, and another brought in 40%, they'd pay 40% of the cost of operation? How are you going to work that? Or are you going to charge them a fixed amount?
It's a fixed amount based on the square footage allocation pursuant to each sublease.
And each one of them will be expected to have personnel present?
Well, we are providing the staff for most of our clients. I will say that in speaking with FedEx, because they are a very large corporation and they have large corporate policies that they really can't deviate from, it's a little different than a smaller freight handler.
Okay, so thank you. So what's going to happen if, let's say, a plumbing supply house on the Cape drops off a piece of freight in Hyannis?
Yes.
How is it going to be determined which carrier gets to carry that across?
The consumer will decide which carrier they want to use based on the price, which basically incentivizes each carrier to make sure they're as competitive as possible to be able to give our community the best price possible.
Well, if he says, I don't care, just get it over there.
Well, then I would probably put it on the next available flight.
Okay. Well, thank you for those responses. I think that,
You're very welcome.
as I said, our concern is to make sure that everybody has a crack, who wants to take a crack at this business can.
Yes.
And obviously, we'd like to see it built up, whether that's better done by cooperation or by separate entities. It's not for us to say necessarily, but I think that, as you suggested, they are all looking at other opportunities, and we're going to facilitate that look just to be sure that they think they're getting the best deal they possibly can.
Understood. And again, I wanted to reiterate the fact that our mission is to help the community of Nantucket and the local businesses of Nantucket, the airport, and all parties involved. And our goal is to provide those services at the very highest level possible at the lowest price possible. And to help the small freight carriers as well as the larger freight carriers be able to provide these services to our community.
Thanks. I have a follow-up to the comments you just made, and would direct everyone's attention to item number 5 on page 3. And it seems to me that what you just described may be in conflict. I may need some additional clarification on this, with this item that says no further sublease. So I'm not quite sure how the model that you've just described is in harmony with this condition, which states that that this consent shall not constitute the commission's consent to any further subletting by the tenant, any subletting by the subtenant, or any assignment by the tenant or subtenant without the commission's prior written consent.
I'd like to address that. As I've heard from people in the airport community, there have been some problems in regards to having control over different operators at different locations within the airport. What we have done is we have set up our business model so that the Airport Commission itself can review each individual sublease from each one of our clients to ensure that the approval, that you're involved in that approval, and that you know who is coming in and coming out of this airport, and also to make sure that they are paying their fees, their landing fees, their freight fees, and so forth. So in other words, the subleases are allowed, but only by the permission of the board.
Which I think is what.
Yeah, I think that's what it says. I just thought that it was important to read
Yes.
that point.
No, and we wanted,
it.
yeah, and again, we wanted to make you a part of that process because we understood that there have been situations where, there have been operators that haven't paid fees or that haven't, so we're trying to help you to control the airport so that, and work together as a team.
Just means
Further question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Are you going to require operators to sign a lease? And if so, what's the term you're going to require them to sign for?
Well, again, with a FedEx, for instance, they're looking at building a new facility, as you probably are aware, and they're looking at a 12 to 18-month lease, depending on how long it takes them to find their facility. So basically, each particular customer, and again, the board would have the opportunity to approve or disapprove of each individual sublease, would vary depending upon the circumstances of each individual carrier. I would think, as a aside, a one-year term would be probably the standard.
Commissioner Buscarin, you had some comments?
Sure. Do you
Questions?
contemplate that you would be sort of a gathering point for all the freight, people that actually flying the freight?
Yes. Not only would we be gathering it for the people that are flying the freight, but we'd also be a central point for the community to go to and for the business community to go to for convenience. And also by having everything, like I said, under one central location, it incentivizes the different carriers to keep their prices very competitive. Otherwise, they won't be getting the business.
You said that...
But you raise an interesting point, too. We have been without a logical, if you will, freight service now for 11 months because of the bankruptcy of Island Air and the inavailability of this freight hangar to anybody up to this point. And I guess, how do we comfort ourselves that we're not boxing ourselves in the same way again? Not suggesting that you're going to go bankrupt, but nobody suggested that Island Air was going to go bankrupt either.
Correct.
And if you're tying this up for a long period of time, at least theoretically, we should put the airport in a position where this can't happen to us again. if it's cost effective.
Sure, I'd like to address that. The inherent risk of a business failure is extremely reduced because you have multiple operators with different business models that are handling, or I should say, carrying the freight. I had mentioned before that if we, let's say, for example, if we had 4 different subtenants that were carrying freight and they were all going at different times and were charging different prices, if the unfortunate event happened that one of them went out of business, there would be 3 other companies ready to carry the ball, so to speak, so that we don't end up in the same situation we ended up in when Island Airlines went out of business. As far as Allies Air Freight is concerned, the rent is only, a couple $1,000s a month. We already are in negotiations with FedEx right now. We could probably have some sort of a letter of intent to the airport very, very shortly. Just that one customer alone would probably pay the rent for about 25 years. So I don't see any problems in regards to making that work. Again, we have a pretty significant investment in both the freight facility in Hyannis and Nantucket. We're not looking at making a lot of money. We're really just looking at getting a nominal return. We are doing a private equity raise for Allies Air, but that's a separate entity altogether. So Allies Air Freight is its own Massachusetts LLC company. It operates freestanding. It has really the only overhead it has is just the rent and the personnel. So, like I said, I don't anticipate that any probability whatsoever of having any problems with Allies Air Freight LLC.
Arthur, can I just...
Not to mention that...
I recognize it's kind of
not to mention that...
day, so to speak.
Okay.
But I would like to suggest for the Commission's consideration that we discuss, before we sign this, we discuss with Council the possibility of adding a clause which says that the lease automatically terminates if the, this is general, and the wording would have to be refined. Automatically terminates in the event of the bankruptcy of the sublessee or in the event they fail to make the building available for freight services. I think that's critical.
Yeah, I believe that that's already covered in the minimum standard.
Excuse me, this is for the consideration of the Commission.
Oh, I'm very sorry. I thought you were asking me. I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, that wasn't quite exactly clear, but it is a good point, Dan, and Manager Rafter, I believe, has a couple comments.
Just a couple quick comments. One, for the Commission's benefit, I'm learning a little bit as we go here on these subleases, but going forward, I think what I'm going to request for any, or require for any sublease request is a concept of operations. I appreciate Mr. Shields coming in tonight to tell us what they're going to do, but I'd like to see exactly how it is it's going to be laid out, what the process is, what some of the pro formas are, and that type of thing. But just a couple of questions for you, Mr. Shields.
Sure.
Do you believe the current facility is large enough to handle FedEx and the other associated freight that's being shipped?
Yes, I do, and the reason for that is that the lease with FedEx, we've already discussed the fact that our first and foremost priority is to the community of Nantucket, and as other clients and operators come to the table, there's language that is going to be in their sublease, which you will see, which will require that they reduce their lease area to accommodate what is needed by our other clients.
And the reason I ask is because we have seen some concepts from FedEx, and looking at the sizes, I'm just curious if FedEx comes in, and as you say, they got to reduce, so Company A comes in, they got to reduce, Company B comes in, they got to reduce, Company C. How are they all going to be able to fit in this smaller box, if you will?
Understood. Well, keeping in mind that the term of the FedEx lease is only going to be for a 12 to 18-month period. So, and if the board has a concern about the length and the term of that lease, we can certainly address that, because obviously you're going to be involved in approving that sublease, and you will see all of the.
I don't know what the board's concern is. I'm just concerned about
Okay.
the physical facility size being capable of handling enough, including FedEx and the other freight that,
Understood.
will be developed.
Understood. I've had 3 meetings with Cape Air, and I've had 1 meeting with Retrix, and we, again, put those people first in regards to the square footage. So in other words, if someone's got to give, it's going to be FedEx, and that is going to be in their sublease. That's in the letter of intent that they're working on right now. And like I said before, you're going to be able to see that,
Okay, so currently there's no agreement, so with anybody, obviously, because you don't have yours in place yet.
Correct.
Let me just try to understand, though. Allies will be able to provide the service of the personnel to offload the aircraft, if you will, sort the freight, charge it necessary fees, so you'll have to have some sort of either software system or something that will track it and that type of thing?
Correct. We actually have hired Gigi, who is one of the managers of the old freight business, as a consultant for 6 months. And she is actually helping us work with the old vendor, the same vendor that they used before, as far as the computer software and so forth, that we're going to be utilizing again.
When you say the old Cape and Islands?
Yes.
Okay. That's all
And as well as the same IT company, that manages the server and all that.
I don't know if it's appropriate, Arthur, or not, but later on in the agenda, I do have some reports that, we have an expression of interest from one company that would like to look at the old FBO for possible use of freight. And I have a tour that I'm going to be giving Thursday with another company as well that want to explore their options. So I just want to make sure that that's all on the table, because it's an interrelated discussion here.
Any other commissioner comments? I have a couple. I like the concept, appreciate what you're doing. I think that it is, helpful to the commission, as you've stated, that we start to address the freight situation that has occurred. At the same time, I feel like we've gotten an awfully lot of information tonight that perhaps had I had all of this sort of as a business plan, I appreciate your coming and explaining it all to us. But I don't know that I'm ready to act on this tonight without giving it some further thought, as well as considering how all the other pieces are going to fit together. And ultimately, I would like a recommendation from the manager with respect to, entering into the sublease as is, or whether it needs a little bit more refinement. The second thing that I would like to see for the next time, assuming that I'm not the only one that, I may vote for this at the next meeting, but I'm not myself prepared to tonight, is I think that we need to also have before us the original master lease. So we have this piece of the information, and that's through no fault of yours. But we don't actually even have before us a description of the premises. I understand that that's all laid out in the original lease, but I do think that it would be helpful, as I've stated on the other leases as well, that we have a clear understanding of the area that's being leased. And I think that that's important, and I'm going to have the same comments when we get to or similar comments when we get to another agenda item, so that you don't feel that this is directed just to you, and that it is important to avoid future disputes that may occur with respect to boundaries and, the limits of leased areas. Now, that may be not as directly applicable to you, given as a sublease request to a lease that's in place, but I do feel that it would be helpful for us to have that information as we sort of consider your proposal, the operation, the impacts this may have, the sublease, as it relates to the master. So those would be my comments.
Now, I
Can I
thought,
make a motion, Mr. Chairman?
1 second, if you would, Dan. Go ahead.
I thought we had actually already approved, not this one, but we'd approved their lease, the sublease, and then this is just a little bit different.
I believe the commission approved the consent, but it was not acceptable to Allies, and they came back with comments, and that's where we went back and forth to get to this document.
Well, the sublease was approved at the last meeting, my understanding.
The sublease
Right.
was.
Right.
Okay.
It was already approved. This is
So-
just a
and the
consent
sublease is
agreement.
signed.
Okay.
This is the consent for subordination.
Okay.
Another question? If you get this lease, will you plan any betterments in the hangar area that you're going to be leasing?
Just cosmetic,
Just cosmetic?
yes.
Okay. How much money would you spend on that? Do you have any budget for that?
About 25,000.
Okay.
And I had one more, and you mentioned your future business plans with respect to the, what'd you call it, a charter
Charter club?
group?
Mhm.
Now, would that be also, you proposing that to operate out of this, partially out of the same location, or is that going to be out of the FBO, or?
Well, when we prior to us operating, obviously, we would have to have another sublease, which you would have to approve we would just be treated as any other, freight handler, so.
I don't know if that question was regarding freight or passenger.
Passenger.
So the other side.
We're not
was-
prepared to talk about passenger right now because basically we're just,
would
that's
not
down the
operate
road.
on
I mean,
this
that's not till spring and there's still, a lot in development right now. What we're trying to do right now is to restore freight service.
Just so you're clear on understanding that passenger service would not be able to go through this facility
Understood. It's in the master lease actually, that it
Yeah.
can only be used for freight.
for the purpose.
And before you make a motion, would you mind if I just mention one more thing?
Go ahead.
Okay. A consideration I would ask the board to consider in regards to not delaying this is that, I'm not sure how often you meet, but if it's a month, let's say, we have staff that are waiting to be hired. We have, things that we're working on. We have IT solutions, scales, computers, software, improvements to be done. Any delay, also, the longer we wait, the harder it's going to be for me to get the other freight carriers on board. As you know, they're looking at other facilities and this and that, and I understand that, they can do what they want. But, it's just going to set us back, is my point, and there could be some inherent risk to the airport by delaying it.
I appreciate those comments, and at the same time, would tell you my personal position on that is I don't feel that would outweigh the inherent risk of a decision that I don't feel I have all of the information, so.
No, I totally understand. I just
That's a
wanted-
balance, and as much as
Of
I
course.
appreciate the risk that you're expressing, I hope that you could also understand from our position.
Totally.
This side of the table is one of protecting the interests of the airport and the town of Nantucket.
Yes. I just
And
wanted,
so again, I could tell you that my position, where I'm coming from, is not one of opposition or against, but one of wanting to be sure that we have a clear understanding and that there is, again, one of, I think, the most important things of working through these agreements diligently is to avoid future complications. And so, in my own opinion, in my position, is that, and hopefully, again, we meet once a month, and that this could be worked on by all parties, and, my hope would be that there would be a motion to table or something similar and be considered at the next meeting.
And
May I make my motion, Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
I'd like to move that any decision on the sublease to Allies Air be postponed till the December meeting of the commission.
can I just make
Go
a
ahead.
little input there, Dan? I would just suggest possibly considering the language that it be at the next commission meeting. I was going to ask later in the agenda that the commission consider possibly a workshop meeting for financial long-range planning. And I'm not sure if you're amenable to that, but
Well, it would have to be a separate, that's fine.
But
I don't want to box ourselves in, though, if we're not ready.
okay. We're looking at 3 weeks from now or so.
I'll just say, I'll amend my motion to say postpone a decision until a future meeting.
Fair enough. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion on the motion on the table?
I I would like to say that my motivation for this is very much like Mr. Gasparo's. I want to ensure that the people of Nantucket have as many options as they possibly can for freight service, recognizing that it has to be efficient and so forth, but nonetheless, we don't want to get boxed in again the way we have been this time. And I apologize to you for not, Mr. Shields and Mr. Goddard, for not having focused on this sooner, but we didn't.
Commissioner Planzer, did you have comments?
Well, I was just curious, what more information do we need to consider before we vote on it? I'm not clear what else we're seeking.
Well, I think that we just heard the business plan tonight, and there seems to be also some reservation with respect to all of the moving parts and freight overall. Perhaps it would be helpful to have the business plan that was described tonight also submitted to us.
I want to understand how long we're tying ourselves up for and how much flexibility we're losing with this arrangement.
My other concern is similar to, or not, just to make sure that I would like to be sure that the manager is comfortable with how the subletting operation is going to be approved and work, whether that's going to become.
That, quite frankly, is a bit onerous. I mean, now we're talking about, we have the primary tenant, McGrath, we'll have a subtenant to Allies, and then we'll have a sub of possibly 1, 2, 3, 4 different companies. Not only is it going to be onerous in terms of lease management, but also enforcement. And we've seen in the past, and I know you may be a different character here, but we've seen in the past, the further we get away from the primary tenant and the master agreement, the less likely it is for us to be able to enforce any serious penalties or anything else if somebody's not in compliance with something. So again, one of my concerns is that, so if you have a subtenant, Company A flying freight, and they don't pay their bills, or they don't do something, and they're not abiding by something, what recourse do we have to go after them and or you? Because there's nothing between us and them.
We're a
essentially.
third-party beneficiary under the contract. By implication, we're a third-party beneficiary to that contract. I certainly think we have an economic interest. We certainly would have a suable interest in it. I'm just wondering whether a shorter term to try this out might be more feasible than a long term. I think that's one of Dan's concerns. I think we understand what this is. I'm not confused by it. I think he's just trying to provide a location for this. I understand that FedEx is probably going to have their own location, given some time.
Within 12 to 18
So that this facility will serve other people other than FedEx 18 months down the road from now.
Exactly.
So,
Well, I guess, Tony, that was part of my question is,
Can
you handle FedEx plus Company A and B and C or whatever?
well, I think that remains to be seen. We're not going to know any more in December than we know now about that.
I speak to that
Well,
a little?
1 second.
Or no? Okay.
Go ahead, Tom.
I disagree slightly because we do have 2 other people who have expressed an interest in providing freight service and want to look at one of our facilities. So we will have a little more information as to the, if you will, how the pie is going to be split. I agree with Mr. Shields. I think there's efficiencies to be had in having a single operations. I don't know that there's enough volume, quite frankly, going through the airport to warrant more than one facility, overhead, et cetera, but I can't, as an airport operator, preclude anyone from doing that. But it may have an impact on his business plan.
Is this facility being used by McGrath for any purposes at all at this point, or he's just
Nothing. He's just paying the rent.
He's just paying the rent. He's getting no
benefit at all.
no benefit from it. So we're depriving him from an income stream by kicking this down the road. That's all I'm saying.
Agreed.
Has McGrath talked to you about this?
Yes. He would like to stop the bleeding.
Of course he would. Of course he would.
I like the concept. I just, again, don't know what the outcome will be if in fact we have, and it's probably for later discussion, whether or not the commission wants to consider utilization of that other facility if a company is interested. Because again, I'm assuming it's going to have an impact on their business plan. I don't know if it's a total negative or if if one company bails out or two company bails out or what. You mentioned that FedEx is enough to carry the entire thing. But I think in the moving pieces that Arthur was referring to is just that. You've got other people in play here that, may have an option or may consider an alternative or an option.
The airport cannot be put in the position of forcing an operator to use a third-party service if another option is available that they're willing to pay for. So I think it's as simple as that. And then the question is it viable after FedEx? If FedEx takes it on, is it viable after FedEx leaves?
Yeah. I mean, as I perceive this contract, there's no exclusive, they're not buying any exclusive right to control all the freight in and out of here. They're just trying to get into the business. And I don't see why that's a problem, but
Right, it doesn't matter what someone else is going to do down the road.
If someone wants to, lease the
They can build a building.
some other building, build something else, nothing's stopping someone
That
else.
doesn't-
And FedEx plans to go ahead and
Right.
get their
Yeah.
own facility anyway. So I don't see the problem of delay here. That's all.
I'm still
with you.
hung up honestly on the sublease portion of
Okay.
it, of the operation, and my concern remains. Again, I just keep thinking back, and I not to tarnish you through what has happened with somebody else, but I do see it as a lesson learned, and I think that my concern is one of enforcement in terms of whether it's a suable interest. That doesn't help us on an immediate violation or problem with the operation that is material impacting the airport, whether the manager has direct recourse because it's a person who is two parties removed.
I have more of a concern of negotiability of a sublease. So if we approve this and they come in with a sublease to FedEx,
You don't have to approve it.
no, we don't, but if we don't, then you come back and say, I'm out of business and I see you later. So
Well,
it kind of gives you negotiating
Well,
leverage
no,
over us.
can I speak to this point, please?
Yeah, I mean, it
Okay.
puts us in a negative position.
Because actually,
I
in looking at,
prefer you negotiate.
yeah, no. Again, the only reason that we were looking at having the business model this way is because we were trying to give you more control over what's going on at the airport. It would be a lot easier for us if we didn't have to go before you when each time we have a new client. So if that's a problem, I have no problem taking that
I
right out of the
just-
business plan right now.
And again, this is my personal
You
opinion.
know,
I would think
again,
the
I was just
commission-
looking at the problems you've had with some other companies and trying to collect fees and this and that and the other thing. And by having the sublease go before the board, it actually gives the board more control. And if that's not an issue for you, if you look at that as cumbersome,
It's a
then
double-edged sword.
I can say right now, that it's off the table. You don't have to worry about looking at any subleases, and it's going to be purely a business contract arrangement. I was purely trying to give you more control over what's going on at the airport, and this was as a result of
And
what I've heard from what's happened.
I appreciate that. I think we have protections in the master lease, in the sublease, and the consent subordination.
Yep,
It's how many more layers of protection do we need? I think,
sure.
and again, I don't want to speak for the commission, but just imagine this is approved, and now, big box company, whatever you want to call it, comes in, and you're asked to approve a sublease. And it's a horrible sublease for whatever reason. You're going to be put into a position of, do I really want to get into this? I think by, and again, I'm speaking just from previous business practice experience, it becomes a problem because it has us influencing negotiations that they may have with subleases.
I would just ask that we allow FedEx to do the sublease because we've already entered negotiations with them under that basis, and because
We don't
they're
know
a
the terms of that. We have no idea what that is.
No, obviously you would have the terms to look at, and
What I'm saying, Bob, is, we're putting the cart before the horse a little bit in that we approve you, and you come into us with a FedEx sublease that, for whatever reason, the commission is adamantly against.
don't approve it.
It's, you know,
Again, that would be the only one I would ask for a sublease approval for because of the large corporation. That's typically the way they do business. As far as the other people, we can keep it completely as a business contract, will not require you to review or approve any further subleases. I'm only asking for the sublease for FedEx because of the corporate structure that they have. It would only be a one-time approval.
Short-term, yeah.
Exactly, and it's only 12 to 18 months, and it's going to benefit the airport because they're actually going to be working on a new facility here at the airport as well.
I would ask to see what the terms of that were then, if we're going to be considering this agreement.
Well, again, it's very preliminary negotiations. There's nothing set in stone. It doesn't.
I understand, but you're putting us in a position of negotiating as a third party without no seat at the table.
Okay, then.
That's just my opinion,
Sure. Again, I would just. Go ahead.
May I make a suggestion?
Go ahead, Dan.
After we consider this motion, that if Mr. Rafter is going to hold a commission workshop, that we put this on the agenda for that workshop as well, so that we're pretty much all on the same page as to what we want to accomplish and not accomplish with this lease. Does that make sense, Mr. Rafter?
I think it does. I would ask again, Bob, if you don't mind sharing just some of the basic terms of that agreement so we can ensure that
Of
it's
course.
not a, off-the-wall type of thing.
Of course.
I'm talking about the larger picture.
Yes, but I'm asking
If
for
he's
more
not going to use
information.
subleases with the local carriers, do we want to have certain guarantees in there? Or can we have certain
Okay.
or not guarantees, but obligations in terms of reporting and so forth?
I've already made the decision that we're not going to, because of Tom's, concern about it being cumbersome, that we will strike having to enter into any subleases with any of our customers other than FedEx, just because it's such a large corporation. So I think that now that that's off the table, I don't think that's at least it hopefully will help to
But the issue
alleviate
would
some of
be
your
in that
concerns.
case, and again, I grant you it's a little bit extreme, but it's not impossible.
No.
That another charter operator shows up with a plane load of freight, they would be directed to you. We would really know nothing about it unless you gave us information about them and how much they brought over and so forth.
Correct.
We would require notice.
Understood. We have no problem giving notice, and also, if you look at this consent agreement, you'll see that there is language in there that we, again, we understood that this was something that would help the airport, and that we would give reports of the various tail numbers that came to our facility, so that in the event they didn't pay a landing fee or they didn't pay a ramp fee or so forth, you would be able to track that and collect those funds.
So we're requiring reports from Allies as well as any other operators, if you will.
Right.
I think that reporting method should perhaps be, at least if it's not spelled out in the document,
I think it is.
well, it's spelled out as reporting,
Okay.
subject to
Well, and
you,
we
but
determine what they are. We create the report. That's the way it typically works. We can clarify that.
Yeah, we would accept whatever method you'd like to do. It's not a problem.
Jamie creates the whole report and draft.
again,
menus.
just, thinking back again, that we have true accountability and whatever that's going to require, and
Well, that was one step that we did not do previously.
That's what I'm concerned about.
Yeah, but we're going to have that
Yeah,
problem
yeah.
with these guys and anybody else. And say a guy in a 747 lands here he doesn't have to go through Allies at all. He could pull up to the GA ramp, say, I'm unloading 20,000 pounds of stuff. we do it that way. So these people are just trying to get in business here, relieving McGrath of paying a monthly, to use this building. It seems to me this is a pretty simple operation. This is not an exclusive deal. We'd have, these measuring how much freight comes in and out. We have that problem whether they're in the business or not. This just provides a
this is
facility
improving
to make
that
this
a little.
easier. Yeah.
By having them report the aggregate and then the individual ones as well.
Again, we're trying to make it easier for our customers to attract customers. So that the Cape Airs and the Retrix aren't looking at building their own facilities where, there isn't even enough sales to support it. But also, we want them as our customers. So they can do whatever they want, as you know. But when they look at the numbers and they see what they're going to pay going through us versus having their own facility, they're going to choose to go through us, hopefully. That's our hope.
That's yours and their business decisions.
Yeah. No, as long as these people are paying their rent.
I'm sympathetic to what you want to do, but from the airport's perspective, we have to protect ourselves.
And as it seems,
From what?
I know, I don't know from
Protect
what.
ourselves from what?
Well, from losing access to it. In effect, it becomes the only facility that is available for whatever reason. Basically they want a monopoly on the service.
That's not true, sir.
That's not my understanding.
That they aspire to that, but I'm not sure from the airport standpoint it's a good idea.
But it's not a monopoly. Anybody can enter the business. They don't have to go to that facility.
No, Retrix can drive right up to the GA ramp and
They have to have a freight handler. You can't necessarily do that for freight.
They can build their own building. They can do whatever they want.
well, I
But they
wouldn't
could-
suggest they do it for free. I'm just saying they wouldn't have to go through Allies, that's
But
all.
an example, Tony, and later on this again is where it's somewhat related, later in the agenda, we have an expression of interest from Retrix to, and they didn't mention specifically the old FBO, but they're considering, looking at the old FBO to run a freight operation. If that's what they want to do, that's, if the commission elects to allow that use for that facility, that's a business, and Cape Air is interested as well. So
But
if
that
if
doesn't
either
sound-
one of them, if we put it out to bid and one of them wants to put into it, it's a business decision. We just have to be able to provide an alternative if it's available. And if somebody wants to come and build their own building and do it, as long as it meets minimum standards, and minimum standards are quite vague on this, just says we get to approve the size of it. So it'd be obviously no smaller than the existing.
I have another question, which relates to the master lease. Is that a 20-year lease?
No, it's,
Well, it was originally. It expires in March of 2020.
And that's when this would expire then? So we're looking at
3-year.
basically, this term is a three-year lease you're looking at.
I don't see the problem with doing this now. I really don't. We're trying to get some people in business here. They'll pay McGrath a few bucks a month. This is a small deal. If someone else wants to get in the business, they can rent some other space at the airport. And we know
We
FedEx
don't
is
have
going to do
any
that.
indication that anybody's going to be doing this out of that facility before the spring anyway. So what's the harm of waiting a month?
Wait, what facility?
Out of the
hangar.
the freight hangar.
That we're talking
Oh, I
about.
thought they were I thought it was January 1st.
January 1st open.
Yeah, they're trying to get in business January 1st, and they won't do that if we kick this to.
Yeah, it's
to
a
next
passenger
meeting.
service. It's the spring.
Yeah, the passenger service is inchoate. It's not
has nothing to do with
organized.
the-
They don't have a permit to do this. They don't have an airplane to do that. This is just a couple of people trying to organize freight out of a building that McGrath would like to sublease, that's all. Pretty simple concept, and if someone else wants to get in the business, they got plenty of opportunity to do that. This is not a monopoly. And if Cape Air wants to come and talk to Tom on Thursday,
Come talk to Tom.
come and talk to Tom.
well,
What's wrong with that?
my question later on the agenda is, will the commission entertain the use of the flat roof building for purposes of freight?
We're in business to lease out stuff at the
There's a
airport.
motion on the floor.
And I think this is a discussion related to that motion. It seems that it's going to
Yeah.
head and materially related to
Yeah.
the vote that we're going to take.
This was popped on me, right at the beginning of the meeting. I don't mind discussing this at some length at this point. Tom is free to make, or anybody's free here to make any comment they want to make. I'm just saying this is a pretty simple deal. It's not a monopoly. It's not going to control what other people do. If Cape Air wants to get the flat roof building and turn that into a freight forwarding or part of it, that's fine too.
Yeah.
That's more competition. So I don't see the issue that we're precluding Cape Air from discussing something on Thursday.
Yeah, why, I mean, I don't understand why we would want to wait on,
Neither do I.
I think other
deciding this.
companies have had plenty of opportunity to pursue a similar.
Right.
Exactly.
And and these are the first people that showed up on our doorstep.
I'm
My
here.
view is first come, first serve. That's my view.
So
Again, it's-
there is a motion on the table, and it's been seconded. Is there any further discussion? So the motion is to table the discussion until a future meeting, with the intent being that it would be discussed at the very next meeting, which may actually even be a workshop or a special meeting in less than 1 month. Any other comments? My feeling is I would like to just take a look at the big freight picture and vote on it at the next meeting.
And I
To have a
agree.
better understanding. It's
Let's
just,
take a vote.
yeah, we will. I mean, that's just my position. I don't think it's fair to not tell you why I'm not voting how I am.
Understood.
But, any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll take a roll call vote. Commissioner Buscarin, how do you vote?
No.
Commissioner Totten?
I vote yes.
Commissioner Planzer?
no.
Commissioner Drake?
Yeah, yes.
And the acting chair votes aye. So we'll consider that at the next meeting.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
Nancy.
much.
And
Thank
try
you
to
for your
do a
time.
workshop beforehand. if possible.
Well, with the next meeting,
Right,
whenever
yeah.
that may be. Thanks for your time
Thank
and
you.
your efforts.
Thank you for your
Thank you very much.
consideration.
Moving on, we have pending leases and contracts set forth on Exhibit 1.
The first is a lease for Hangar 6 LLC, formerly known as M&R Aerodrome. This is for Hangar 6, Mr. McGrath's hangar. We have been back and forth with attorneys and so on for about the past 2 years. This is for 10 years with 2 5-year options. And as you may recall, Mr. McGrath has put in significant improvements into the facility. He put in a new roof, he shingled the sides, and he's in the process of putting on a new door, I believe, if he hasn't done so already. You want me to just continue through?
No, I think we should take them one at a time, if we could. So I have a concern, which is simply the description of the premises. I don't have I don't have concern with the overall lease, but again, I feel like, on the very last page, Exhibit A, we're dealing with GIS, and there's no actual description. How wide is the lease area? How long is the lease area? I know it's around the hangar. Is that of any concern to you as the manager? In terms of what area does this lease actually cover? I really feel for leases of a half an acre of land that it's appropriate to have a a plan that describes meets and bounds.
We can do that, but my only concern is, in order to do that, it's going to probably cost more than what we're generating in the lease.
Well, I don't think that it should be us. I think that
Require the tenant to do that.
Right, I would think that, I guess, if you don't feel that it's required and you aren't
Well, I
concerned
think
that,
for a long term, it's certainly something that, and ultimately, you're right, I would like to have every single parcel, mapped out so that we do have it.
yeah, let's say someone's parking their plane outside of the lease area,
Well,
right?
the
Or
guy-
somebody is
the one next
stockpiling their
door.
dirt.
Right next door, there's another hangar. There's an overlap. There might be questions. I don't disagree with it at all. I might make a suggestion that we consider approving it subject to them having one accomplished within a certain period of time, only because we have, quite frankly, I don't want to say we drug it out, but we've been back and forth on this issue for 2 years. You know, maybe we say, okay, it's approved subject to a requirement that the tenant supply meets and bounds by, and I don't know, within 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever. And again, I don't know if that's going to be amenable to the tenant, but I agree with your comment. I agree with the concept. I just, if I'm in their position, you know, you're kind of putting this on me now after 2 years. Why didn't you tell me before? I would have had it done and you could approve it.
I haven't seen it for 2 years, as I saw it tonight.
This agreement?
Yeah, we've seen this one for,
I think we've seen it before, if I'm not mistaken. I know we've been back and forth several times with attorneys.
I just think you need,
Yeah, because we had to approve it in concept before he would make the improvements.
Oh,
Yeah.
right.
but we didn't
right.
have a plan.
I don't know whether we did or not.
No, we didn't have a plan at the time. It was the same facility. That's, you know.
So like, let's say that he's, you know, using an area outside of the leased premises. And again, you know, the discussion that we just had leads to my concern, what if this turns into another sublease? And
Again, I don't object, and I think the concept is good. I just think that if I'm in his position, quite frankly, take the hanger, I'll see it. You know, I'm just saying, this is a new issue after we've been through probably 25 or 30 issues on this lease. And I think it's a good concept, but I don't know that it should hold up the approval. That's my only comment.
I think there's an out in paragraph 2.1 of the lease, which says the parties agree that notwithstanding the foregoing, the exact location of the premises shall be as mutually agreed to by the parties. The parties agree to amend this lease to incorporate said plan into Exhibit A. That doesn't say who will pay the cost of it, but otherwise I think it pretty much takes care of what you're looking for.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is expand on that
right,
and say that there will be, however the language is, a detailed meets and bounds survey completed by the tenant within X period of time. Something
that
to
would be
effect.
fine, and I would,
Yeah.
and I guess I would just say, going forward,
It
for
should be
lease
in all of them.
agreements, we should really have plans that, you know,
We need to make
just
sure
think about the
it's a-
Bunker Road
a
ones,
standard in
and
any lease that,
where you just basically have people either using these GIS or,
could you give me the correct language for that? Is it a detailed meets and bounds
yeah, just a
survey?
plan that describes meets and bounds of the premises.
Okay. So going forward, maybe we need to put that in all the leases.
Tom, it was in the original document.
It was.
It was in one of the
And they struck it?
versions. It was altered.
So see, they don't want to do it because it costs money. I mean, that's what the rub is on these, right? Is
Well,
that,
and again, I don't want to speak for the commission, I just want to tell you some experience I've had where if this is a, for lack of a better term, a contentious issue, but we still want the lease and they still want to participate, it could be that, you know, whatever it is, a month or 2 months or whatever the cost is abated rent to pay for that.
Yeah.
I don't know that you want to do that as a establishing precedent.
I mean, it could cost 3 years' rent. You get,
Three
you
years'
get a,
And that's the concern I
It's-
think that the
it's
tenant's going to have.
1,000,
I'm prepared to move ahead on this lease the way it is.
yeah, I will too,
1542
but I
a year.
want to bring the point that I just think it's important for the airport to know and be able, let's say somebody's using an area
No, I
outside.
totally agree with the concept, but maybe, for lack of a better term, we have to eat this when we do it,
Yep,
and going forward, we make it
I
a
was gonna say
requirement.
going forward, so.
Because I think it's a very good
I'll go
concept that you-
along with that to sort of hopefully have made the point why I think it's important to have an appropriate description of
I don't
of
think it's
leased
a
premises.
significant cost.
But I guess this also then leads to the next question, which is, how is the base rent determined?
It's based on the aeronautical fee per square footage, which is 44 cents, I believe. Is that correct? Or is it,
That's a
Yeah,
year,
it is,
not
yes.
a month.
which is based on,
But
a-
it was also
42.
the rent from the expired term with the new CPI
added
into it.
back into it? Yeah. So it's a fair market value based on appraisal, and then there's a CPI adjusted to it, which is what we have to do for land on all aeronautical.
I understand that part of it. I guess I'm just questioning a half an acre for $1,500 a year.
I don't disagree, it's
Pretty
So-
good,
crazy.
pretty good
but-
When you
deal.
put it that way, right?
Where's the better offer?
Well, I don't think that's the, I mean, is this something that instead for our future rates and charges?
It is, it
Yeah,
is.
remember, he owns the building.
Right.
Right, but the concern is, and rightfully so, Arthur, I think past practice has been that we have accepted the fair market value as the base or the only price and established that under rates and charges. If you recall, we made some changes to rates and charges that said as negotiated, because the objective is that we are not allowed to charge less than fair market value, but the objective is to get as high a value as we can out of it. So past practice has been that here's fair market value, that's what we're charging. We changed that, I believe, in the last review of rates and charges to say that at a minimum, that's what it will be, but our
Very good.
goal is to, obtain a higher price, obviously.
Okay, I'm done. Anyone else?
I move approval of the lease.
Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Buscarin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Topol?
Aye.
Commissioner Blanzer?
Aye.
Commissioner Chairman Drake?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Thank you for,
Next is a contract with Trillion Aviation for $30,000. It's for the parking lot consultant services that we've spoken about before. We could only find two names. We got one after we accepted a proposal for a third, but this was the cheapest price that we received, and I believe a better proposal as well. And again, it's for all of the services that were discussed at the subcommittee meeting, where they'll come in and evaluate not only the hardware and software, but the operation of it, and make recommendations accordingly, as well as craft the RFP and oversee any award and that type of thing for whatever the recommendation is to manage and operate the facility going forward.
is there any discussion or questions regarding the contract with Trillion Aviation?
No.
I'll move approval.
How many contractors have we had looking at the parking lot at the airport?
What do you mean by?
In other words, since you've gotten here, haven't we tried this before with somebody put that system in there which didn't work
They were,
well?
they're the hardware and software providers.
Right,
This is a consultant to evaluate all those different types
right.
over what we have, determine what the best revenue control system, or parks control is what it's called, system is, and also evaluate the method of operation. Should we continue to do it in-house? Should we put it out to a third-party operation? Should it be a seasonal part-time thing where you put it out for somebody? Should it be a completely pay-on-foot system as it is today, or a cashier? All those various alternatives, as well as a recommended rate structure.
At our current level of revenue at the parking lot, how long will it take to pay off the $30,000 for this new guy?
Couple of months.
Okay. Okay.
If I may add, that
We actually asked, the commission asked Mr. Raptor to get this, to approach it this way.
And this,
Oh, I'm well aware of that.
this is also covered under capital because we had appropriated sufficient funds for this, as well as the hardware.
Right. I just hope this works well.
I think we all.
Gotta be better.
This is not a pretty picture here.
Yeah.
Well, but again, remember, parking is a very high revenue for airports.
I look forward to the day.
Well, we're currently, Jamie, what do we make, about 300,000 a year?
270 was the number we were given at our
70,000?
270
Oh, I
was
was
the
gonna
number that
say.
you said at the subcommittee
Yeah,
meeting.
it's $270,000 a year. we feel it should be closer to the 350, but this is where a consultant's going to come in and say, here's where you should be and here's how you get there.
Looks good to me.
So we have a motion to approve, and was there a second? There
I'll
was.
make the motion.
I'll second.
Further discussion? Hearing none. Commissioner Buscarin?
Aye.
Commissioner Totten?
Aye.
Commissioner Planzer?
Aye.
Commissioner Drake?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well.
Next is a contract with Airport Media Solutions for $12,500 to develop the advertising program at the airport. You may recall, we discussed this previously, where, again, another revenue source is advertising. We are making not nearly as much as we should on advertising. We do make a little bit of money. We had sought proposals from 3 different companies. This was essentially the only one that responded. The individual has a very good grasp and has done business at smaller airports and understands our clientele. So what they would be doing is coming in and developing a program in-house, identifying the opportunities, the rate sheets, and getting a feel and a sense from the commission and the town and everyone else what they want to see there. And as I explained to this consultant, I said, we certainly don't want to see Las Vegas glitz and glitter. We want just the opposite. And for that reason, they want to plan a visit to the island on Stroll weekend to get a sense of that sense of place. And I told them, I said, once you get to Nantucket, you'll realize you are in a different place. And we want our advertising program to have that sense and feel when you're in the terminal. We don't want a lot of fancy lights and all that kind of stuff, so.
Do you think they're going to get that sense on Christmas stroll weekend?
Well, what they're looking for, they'll get a sense of our terminal and the environment there. What they're really looking for on Stroll is to meet some of the shopkeepers and innkeepers and get a sense of what they are and who they are. And just a very quick contact. They understand they're going to be doing a lot of business, but they want to, introduction, drop a card, and go to the next one. But they want to see what Nantucket's about. So.
I move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none. Commissioner Buscarin?
Aye.
Commissioner Toppen?
Aye.
Commissioner Planzer?
Aye.
Chairman Drake?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Moving on. Manager Rafter, would you like to go over the grant award and grant assurances?
Yes, this is for the state Massachusetts DOT grant award and related grant assurances for the Airfield Electrical Vault project is one grant. The other is a combined one of the interactive training as well as the upgrade to the public address system and flight information display system. These are, again, the 5% award that the grant that the state normally funds as a portion of the project as well as the grant assurances. The third aspect, if I may, kind of jump to that,
Yep.
is an update to the grant signing letter of authorization. In the past, the commission has authorized the chairman to sign these grants. We'd like to ask that the vice chair also have that approval in the absence of the chairman.
I'll make a motion to approve that authority.
Second.
If I could ask to amend the motion to accept the grant awards for the first 2 items and update the grant signing authority?
I think it should actually be 2 different motions.
Yeah,
So
do
the first two.
the,
You're probably
do the
right.
letter
We
of
should do the-
authorization first,
Right.
right?
Well, I think we should go in order of the agenda.
No, but I asked the same question, Andrea, thinking that it was imperative, but it's not.
Oh, okay,
so-
okay.
So we should just go in order of the agenda so the minutes
Yes.
are clear. So I think we could do one motion for the 2 grant award and grant assurances acceptance. Is there such a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a
Second.
second? Any further discussion? Hearing none. Commissioner Buscarin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Totten?
Aye.
Commissioner Planzer?
Aye.
Chairman Drake?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. And then is there a motion to update the grant signing letter of authorization as drafted?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Commissioner Buscarin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Toppen?
Aye.
Your plans are? Chairman Drake?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Moving on to finance, we have the capital requests in our packet, as well as the first draft of the operating budget. Manager Rafter, would you like to take us through that? I see
Yes,
that we have our finance manager here as well.
At the prior commission meeting, I provided a list to the commission of the capital projects. This is a little more detail in the sheet, and there is much more detail. If anyone is interested, we have all of the pictures and the source of estimates and so on and so forth. I would like to mention, though, that we are removing one of the projects, and it's on the first page, the heavy-duty brush deck for $30,000. After discussions with the state on our ecological plan, our environmental coordinator advised that we are not in need of that this year and can defer it 1 or 2 years. This has been presented to the Capital Committee. I met with them last week. There were a few questions. We have tentatively scheduled a tour of the airport with our representative from the Finance Committee. This is something they're doing this year. They've assigned representatives to go to each department and get more familiar with their specific capital projects. So we can go through each of these, or if you have any questions on any of them, I'll be glad to entertain that. On the back of the page at the bottom, it breaks out the amount that is FAA reimbursable on those projects, and then what our share would be. So we're in basically a total of $1,360,000 in order to get a total of $4.115 million in the projects. This is a little bit higher number than typical for what I would consider fully funded by the airport, but we still believe it's within our range, and looking at the debt service and what is dropping off in another year or two, we should be okay.
Do you have a date to be before the Capcom?
We went last week.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that.
Yeah.
And it went well?
It went very well. Very few questions. The one, I guess, major question was not directly related to capital, but regarding the repayment to the town, if that could be expedited. And I said, well, you're sending me a mixed message here where I'm deferring capital projects, but, you want, this just beeped, I think it's over. So I said, in a perfect world, I'd love to have plenty of money. Should we keep going?
Yeah.
We should have plenty of money to, I would love to have plenty of money to repay you early, but I have to balance the needs of capital, operating, and the repayment. So that was the only real question.
Are there any other questions on the capital requests?
No.
The
Budget?
Operating budget, as I mentioned previously, we have to supply the finance department a copy of our budget by November 21st. So I wanted to get something before the commission tonight, prior to getting anything to the finance department. So I will say this is a very preliminary, rough draft. I still have to make some cuts and look at some other things. I will tell you, though, the major increase in the expense side is primarily in the salary and wage. Well, let me first start with the revenue. Jamie has done a pretty thorough analysis of our revenue and based it on current information and previous trends, and still has been conservative, and I think that's a very plausible revenue. So we are seeing some increases as year-to-date this year. We're ahead of last year significantly, very much in line with this amount. On the expense side, the major driver, I think, for that is in the salary and wage, and you'll see we have $131,000 that we're putting in there in anticipation for the possible retirement of 2 individuals. We had discussions today, believe it or not, with our human resource attorney, who mentioned either a stabilization fund or another type of fund where those types of things should possibly land eventually. But we have to be prepared for it, otherwise it's going to be an unbudgeted hit if in fact these two individuals retire. So there's $131,000 for that. There's a significant increase in the pension as well as the medical, and those numbers are provided to us by town. And there's about $165,000 in two new positions that we're requesting. One is an SMS manager, which is part of a regulatory change that is being instituted by the federal government. We're going to be required to do safety management systems. The other is a new position in, or additional position in the operations department. So that on the salary and wages side, that's $431,000 of the overall expense increase. As I say, there's some others in here that I still need to work at trimming back. But I would like to kind of ask you to consider looking at the global picture right now. Essentially, what has happened in the past is that in order to balance our budget, we rely on our retained earnings, and we draw from our retained earnings. This year, we will be drawing more from our fuel revolver. As you'll see on the front page at the bottom, in the fuel revolver, there's $1.7 million in there. That's a significant chunk of change in that revolver. The request I'd like to make to the Commission for your consideration is to hold a workshop to discuss the future and long-range financial planning, meaning how much should be, we'll look into questions such as how much should be left in the revolver to protect us and how much is too much and where should it be transferred over. One other thought that Jamie had I think is very good is that we may establish a cap in the fuel revolver while we prepare our budget, but as we get closer to town meeting, we will have much better information as to the market of fuel and what that's going to do and the volatility. And therefore, we may ask for a change. I believe we can do that right up until the time that FinCom makes their motions. And if so, what I would suggest is consideration of things such as if we were going to increase it and needed additional funding, we would take it from what is in the revolver right now, part of that 1.7. There's decisions to be made as to how much we apply to offset the operating account from the fuel revolver as opposed to retained earnings. In the retained earnings, there is part of that calculation is about $1 million in PFC funds as well that we're going to need to address and put into a separate fund, but we're going to need to establish some internal guidelines as to what the policies are, how that money, what priorities that will be spent on, whether it'll fall completely to operating or whether we put some of that towards a capital or whatever it may be. So I think there's a number of questions that we need to start putting some framework together on financial policies with regard to these funds that we have. The best way to describe this right now is we're okay financially, but it's kind of a moving target and it's not stabilized. And we want to establish parameters going forward to ensure that the operating budget is stable and look at all the other funds and available sources. And that's why I would like to request, the reason I'm requesting a workshop is because the Finance Subcommittee is made up of the entire commission. So you can call it a subcommittee meeting and call it a workshop, whatever you want, but I think there's just a lot of questions that we need to address in terms of the global perspective here.
It's not a pretty picture to be drawing down $1 million a year on our retained earnings. That's not a good long-term plan. I mean,
no, and Tony,
if I were, in the finance committee, I'd be wondering what the heck we're doing over here.
I had this same discussion.
I agree, but I think the other side of it is that the surplus in the fuel revolver should be viewed as net operating revenue.
So, and this is, I've had this discussion every year with the Finance Committee. Similar type comments, and I understand it, But what you have to understand is that retained earnings, as you know, is primarily set aside for capital and longer, bigger projects that you're going to need, assembly line, building, that type of thing.
And not operating budget.
Correct. However, we also have a funding source of 95% for our major capital items, okay? So that's part of it. The other part, though, is that we have retained earnings, although we use it as a plug, if you will, to balance the budget. As I've told the Finance Committee, we manage to actual, not to budget. We are still building this budget. Although we project $1 million or so, the reality is we usually maybe use 800 of that, if that. And as Dan said, we're using that because we're putting $1.7 million into a fuel account. If we theoretically reduce that cap on a fuel revolver, we could force a lot of that up into the operating account, but it doesn't give us the insulation, if you will, that we need in the revolver. So we have a couple of moving targets here. One is the retained earnings, because of PFCs and that thing, they were fairly new a couple years ago. We have to pull that out and see what the true retained earnings are going to be. The fuel account. There have been years where we had nothing in a fuel revolver, then there's 600,000, now we're up to $1.7 million. So, we're still balancing that volatility out and try to figure a happy place for that. Let's assume we say a happy place is keep $1 million in the fuel revolver.
But Tom, excuse me, that's not quite a true picture, because the years we didn't have much balance, that amount was actually, because we were up at the cap, that amount was actually transferred over to the operating budget. So whether it's retained in the fuel,
it's a matter of where
transferred out
Yeah.
because we've met the cap. The margin is essentially the same.
Right. It's a matter of where the money's stuck. So in prior years, we had less in the revolver, but we were pretty good in the operating side.
Right.
But again, Tony, I agree, and these are the type of things that we need to look at and say, let's cut to the chase here and find out, what are we going to do with retained earnings? What's the policy going to be? What's the policy on the fuel going to be? What are we going to do with the PFCs? How are we going to allocate these funds? And how do we get to a sustainable, revenue exceeding expense operating budget?
Yeah, because we're certainly not there now, if you look at.
Well, if you look at the top numbers, you're right. Now I have $1.7 million in my back pocket in fuel. We're doing okay.
Which is operating revenue.
It's an operating revenue in excess of the expense. And I can tell you that the latest year-to-date, and I'm going to ask Jamie to correct me if I'm wrong, but the latest year-to-date actual report is showing us about $500,000 better than last year. And we made a profit last year. So again, it's a tricky numbers game, don't get me wrong, and I know where you're coming from, but the bottom line is we're okay, but the problem is it keeps shifting, and that's what we want to have this workshop on, to say, okay, how do we minimize that and solidify going forward continuous numbers so we're not seeing those types of things.
Does the Finance Committee understand the fuel revolver?
There are certain members, I believe, that do, yes. Yeah.
Kind of like the Airport Commission.
So again, I'm not asking for approval, but what I would beg you to do is, if you have questions or comments on this, please get them to us by the middle of next week, because again, we have to do another draft of this and send it to the town finance department. We then will come back to the commission at our December meeting, and then it should be much more refined. Then I have a meeting with the town manager, and we'll go through the process with FinCom and everyone else after the first year.
Any questions?
So again, I implore you, please get any comments, questions to us by Wednesday of next week, if you could.
And when do you want to do the workshop?
In the workshop, I would ask Janine to look at the schedule. We are considering, I think, the end of this month.
We were looking at November 30th.
which I know it's not far in advance of the, or it's not a big separation between that and the next commission meeting, but I think there's a lot of things that we need to talk about candidly that could take some time on the long-range financial planning.
Why does, when two people retire, we require to throw in $131,000 on the top of the heap? What's that about? Is that a retirement?
It is part of the
Program.
existing union contract as to what they're allowed to cash in at retirement.
And that's,
It's essentially
Their
their
sick
accrued
time.
sick leave.
they're accrued sick leave, right?
Yep.
Okay.
And we are,
Well, we're not going to do a lot about that tonight.
no, but we're
Good to be
starting the
planning for.
Not going to
process,
do a lot about it. The question is, how do you ease the pain in the future?
Right.
Right.
which we've started already in some of the other previous union negotiations. Anything else on the budget?
Move on to the flat roof building discussion.
As I mentioned earlier, we have in the packet what I can best describe as a request or expression of interest from Retrix Aviation. They're looking to perform a freight operation, and they're looking to purchase a 402C cargo aircraft. They're looking for 1,000 square feet, planning to run 3 to 6 round trips per day, Monday through Friday. And the discussions I've had with them are that they would be interested possibly in the old FBO or flat roof building. I've had similar discussions with Cape Air. Cape Air's coming out Thursday with their president to tour the facility and make a determination whether or not they think that's viable. Again, I think it's going to come down to the commission whether or not we want to, whether you want to, keep that building there as that potential use. There are some drawbacks, and I'm going to make it known to both operations that, we've had pipes freeze there quite often in the winter. We had to put heaters in, so there's some upgrades that would need to be completed there. It is not the prettiest picture. Maybe it's good for a shorter period of time, I don't know. But if, in fact, the commission would like us to entertain these alternatives, we would have to put out an RFP if they continue to be interested.
Why wouldn't we just give
Can
them
we
a...
put this on the agenda for the workshop too?
Yeah, yes.
What I was thinking. I was thinking that it may be helpful for you to work up a little plan of what might work.
When you say a plan,
If this was to be used for
Functionally.
freight,
okay.
right? So are they going to be limited to certain size vehicles?
And
Like
this-
we believe
this goes-
back in box trucks up there.
This is going back to what I mentioned earlier. We're going to require a concept of operation. If they're interested, I want to know how it is, what are you going to do, how are you going to make this function, what improvements are you going to make, what are your pro formas, those types of things.
That's fine, but I don't think we should contemplate us fixing up the flat roof
No.
building. How about a net lease, and they can put all the betterments they want in there?
That's the only way I would recommend it.
Well, that's the only way to
Net-
do
net
business,
To them.
yeah.
But we just would have, since there's two people that has expressed interest, my understanding is we'd have to put it out to bid or RFP. And we just have to prepare that document.
Yeah, if we do, we do, that's fine.
I guess
Again,
the
it's okay
bigger
with me.
question is, how does the commission feel about that location for that use?
Well, and maybe
You know
If I'm
I think
hearing,
we
and that's
can-
what you think should be in a future
I just-
agenda item?
if I may, what I could do for the next agenda item is put together, for lack of a better term, a term sheet and see what the commission's interest is. Would you want to lease it for a short term, a long term, that type of thing? Would you want to use it for freight under these circumstances, and kind of give you, like you said, Arthur, what is it we're getting into? Not just lease it to somebody and let them run whatever they want, however they want, but have a clear understanding. I don't think we should have a situation as we did this evening where Mr. Shields had to come in and give us, we should have that in writing before we consider any leases, subleases, whatever, I
Should
think.
be pros and cons.
Which is what, in an RFP, we would require. We'd require a proposal, with the operating plan and so on and so forth. But again, it's, as I told both Retrix and Cape Air, the first decision is whether or not the commission would even entertain use of that building in its current location for a freight operation. And if that's a go,
I don't see that we have any, as much as I hate the idea, I don't see that we have any choice.
It's a way to make money with the building.
Right.
On the positive. On the negative, as I see it, is there any chances for negative repercussions to the FBO operation itself? And
Well,
is there
that's
any?
what, I think that's what we need to get from Mr. Rafter.
Yeah.
Right, and then my other, is there any chance that, given that location, that we're gonna be clogging up the traffic flow in and out of there? If you've got someone that's pulling forward, backing up,
that's really my only concern is landside congestion. It works very functionally, I think, from the air side because of the proximity of the aircraft. They're then able to just wheel them on carts over to the building, put it through there. But I do
My
have,
experience, however, and it's obviously anecdotal, but my experience over at the current freight hangar is that there's very seldom more than, at most, 2 people there at any given time.
so
Coming to pick stuff up.
we could put it out in an RFP, and if we receive, we always have the right to reject any and all proposals, or we can accept the proposal.
And the RFP would be for a freight service out of the old FBO? Or is it to see what someone might do with those things? Like, someone might have a proposal to move them somewhere and use them for something else? I mean, what is the RFP?
That's a very good question. I think that's what, we need to discuss. The initial discussion we've had previously was to make it an open RFP so that if somebody wanted to purchase a facility and relocate it, they could. If they wanted to propose an operation there, whether it be freight or other, they could also do that. So we can try to craft it somewhat what we're doing for the old gift shop, an open-ended type thing.
But you're going to talk to Cape Air and Retrix, and you can flesh that out then. They're going to.
Well, but what we'll tell them is, this is going to have to go out to RFP. If you're interested, then you can submit a proposal under that accordingly, and detail your operation, how you're going to do it.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, they'll be able to give us a pretty good indication of whether they're interested or not after they take a look at it.
Of course, that's all I was saying.
Yep. And one way or the other, we were going down that path of, as I described, a general RFP for whatever.
Fine.
Pick it up, move it, or use it.
Good.
Yeah.
so you'll work on that, and we'll have it for our next meeting?
Not the RFP.
No?
Because he's going to ask
An
ask
RFP.
them to do it.
Just,
Well, a draft.
I have the gift shop RFP about 95% complete, and that probably took me 2 to 2.5 months.
Okay. I gotcha.
It was ironic. Janine and I are working on 2 different RFPs the same day, and all you heard from one office to the next was, between formatting, language, they're not simple by any stretch of the imagination, especially when you're starting a century from scratch, because quite frankly, that has created challenges historically. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
So I will do my best, though, to have something. I may be able to use some of the gift shop now that I have that as a base, so.
Does anyone have anything further on the flat roof building?
No.
Air service update?
As you may be aware, Retrix started their full operation. They're flying 6 flights a day, Monday through Friday, modified on weekends. They did have some introductory fares that were very attractive. I would say ridiculously low. I took the advantage of one for $13. But I think, if anything, what it has demonstrated is the flexibility of their company to have variable pricing. So that's a good sign. Everything else is yet to be seen. It's a very nice aircraft. It's brand new. It's very fast. With regard to the island shuttle, I placed a call to Flight Standards District Office, FAA office, and asked, basically, where are they? What can we do to help? And they said it really depends on each carrier. They indicated they're going back and forth with Rick Arugio on their various manuals that are required. There's still some that he's working on. And I said, well, assuming all the manuals are approved, what's the time frame after that? They said it can be anywhere from 3 to 9 months. It really depends on the operator. So still no definitive answer, but some good indication is that Mr. Arugio and another employee from the company came in a week or two ago to get ID badges. So they're obviously moving the ball down the court as much as they can, I guess. We've had reports of Cape Air's fares increasing significantly. That is one of the things I think that we're going to be putting on a task once we hire an air service consultant. In that regard, I have a meeting next week on the Vineyard with Martha's Vineyard and Hyannis managers, the Cape and Islands Airport group that we put together, and we're going to be looking at a collective air service consultant agreement or RFP.
And the Cape Air was the Boston route?
I've heard it on both Boston and Hyannis. I heard a story this morning of a very high fare on Boston.
You saw that letter in the Ink and
They're
M.
they're pretty steep
Crazy,
now to
yeah.
Boston.
Yeah, there was a letter to
I
the
got
editor last week.
I called up fairly late for a flight, and the one-way fare was $239.
That was what somebody was quoted today.
I've seen them higher, too.
I've seen higher, $400.
And I saw Retrix was well over 100 and something.
I believe Retrix had published 109 non-refundable, and then there's a higher one for
Hyannis.
refundable.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's somewhere in there.
You saw that letter in the Ink and M from that lady that had an interaction with Cape Air, which was not a happy time for her.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
I won't trouble you with them now, but I have a few examples of my own
Right.
from as recently as a couple of days ago.
So they're not making a lot of friends.
But lots of money.
Well, good for them. I mean, that's,
We hope.
It's business.
I'm not flying.
Move on to the next one. Nobody or Farm Road Development, I have the land release about 95% complete. Again, another document you'd think would be very easy to complete. It's about 45 pages, and that's without the 3 years of audit returns and their methodology identified for in lieu services. We are setting up a conference call with our compliance officer, Jorge Pantelli. NOAA has prepared a methodology for the services in lieu of rent, and we've sent that to George. He likes the concept. He wants to discuss it further, so we're setting up a conference call with him to finalize that, and once that's complete, we will then submit the land release to the FAA for the project. Also trying to set up a meeting with the town consultant who was going to have their sub-consultant work on the financial return on investment for the project and try to iron out exactly what we need to get accomplished there. Any other questions, or should I move on to the manager's report?
You can move on.
Okay, the air traffic control tower and the projects, we're still working on, I should say Janine and the contractor are working on the punch list for the control tower. They're moving along with that. They're making some progress, but I think there's another meeting set up next week, if I'm not mistaken, with a number of the companies. So, the vault replacement project, the schedule and submittals are being reviewed by the engineering firm, as well as the same with the FIDS PA and interactive employee training. We have a security camera project that we're still not exactly sure of the status, other than they've awarded a contract, and they're talking about, I think, coming out within the next couple of weeks to begin the project. This is the one that the state is giving to us absolutely free, which is a good price. The FY18 AIP projects, Jacob's in the process of preparing contracts for us on that. On the RFQ, RFP side of the house, we can wait for the subcommittee report. I will say that the subcommittee is going to recommend two firms. We received 7 proposals for on-call engineering. The subcommittee would like to recommend 2 firms, Jacobs and McFarland Johnson, for a term of 1 year each with 2 one-year options, I believe it is. Very competitive process. I think there are some very good proposals in there. The committee, I think, did a very diligent and open and fair evaluation, did a great job, and I'd like to thank all the participants, including Commissioner Gasparo. So we'd like to make that recommendation. I don't know if that has to be formally approved, or what's the next step for that?
They probably should.
Okay, so I'd like to ask for the approval for proceeding with contracts with both Jacobs and McFarland Johnson for on-call services. I guess we need a vote for
We
that?
need a motion.
Is there a motion?
I'll make that
I'll
motion.
make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? I would just expand, and I think that Manager Rafter appropriately summarized it, and we did spend, those of us on the committee, significant hours reading and meeting and discussing. It was quite an endeavor, and I'm quite impressed with the firm that we're picking, and we had, as you said, definitely had a couple that really came to the top, and I think that the airport is going to be well-served going this route. With that, any further discussion? Commissioner Buscarin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Toppel?
Aye.
Commissioner Planzer?
Aye?
Chairman Drake?
Aye.
I vote aye as well.
Going on further on projects and things, we have the fuel farm painting of the pipes, which has been completed. The parking lot, we just voted on that for the consultant. As I mentioned, I'm about 95% complete an RFP on the old gift shop space. We also received, and I believe it's in your packet, a expression of interest from the restaurant operator who would like to lease that space. However, Janine did check with the 30B specialist, the office, the Inspector General, who indicated that we must put that out for an RFP. So I'm glad that the restaurant is interested, but we're going to have to finalize that RFP and get that out on the street, and I'm hoping to do that as soon as possible.
Did the restaurant indicate what they would do with the space?
Not specifically, but they just said an
As an appendage.
appendage to their existing operation. I think they're looking at
Dogs and burgers, maybe, quick, yeah.
whatever, I don't know, so.
Drive-through.
On the operations side of the house, on October 27th in the evening, we had a Cessna 402 land and its gear collapsed. There was one individual, was a pilot, there were no injuries, some significant damage to the aircraft and took out a couple of lights, but I would like to commend both our entire staff. Everyone responded very well. It was not a nice night weather-wise. There were winds and rains, and it was kind of cold out there. But they stabilized the aircraft as best they could. We were unable to remove it that evening. The following day, it was off and out of the runway before noon. So, again, the fact that everybody was okay, and our crew did a very good job in their response. So, I mentioned earlier, Capital Committee is going to be visiting the airport tentatively tomorrow with their representative. We held a meeting with the FBO and operations staff to review the summer results and look at ways to improve the FBO and the line service. A lot of good ideas came out of that. We're having a follow-up meeting with the FBO staff on the specifics and particulars of that to see what we can implement. The operations department and maintenance will be doing a joint training Monday, and have invited the Nantucket Fire Department to come over and participate as well. So there's a lot of good things happening there. It's beneficial for them to train with us and us to train with them, because they're our only mutual aid hope right now. Continuing to work on the family assistance program, the rules and regulations, and as I mentioned, the Cape and Islands Airport coordination. We have a meeting next week. There may be a possible visit from MassDOT Aeronautics Chief Jeff DiCarlo. He had indicated he may be coming over Friday. I told him I'd be available if he's interested. We haven't confirmed that back yet. We also have a diagram from TSA, and I see Dr. Dickler's in the audience, for a request for installing a full-body scanner. We sent back to them our construction alteration application, which they're going to have to go through, and we'll look at that, but I think that's good progress and should be very beneficial. The jury's still out. Actually, I don't want to say that. I think TSA probably has data on the processing rates. Initially, the jury was out on whether or not it would slow things down, but I don't think that has been the case. I think it's a higher level of security. It's better. And if we can get this done, I think that's an excellent improvement for us. Another piece on the operations side, our security staff will be performing what's called ALICE training in January. If the commission is interested, that is for active shooter and what you're supposed to be doing in those circumstances. What I try to do for each staff meeting, I try to have an educational focus on, we pick a grant assurance or two and go over that. We also try to do safety tips, and one that came up was active shooter, and we said, what do you do in a case of an active shooter? And everybody said, oh, we've been through that training, but we forget, so we're going to do recurrent training on that. Before we go on to statistics, just an update on the personnel side as well. Deb Crooks and myself attended the a seminar, if you will. It was a free seminar downtown. Chamber of Commerce had a company come in, a legal firm, on the various types of work visas, and specifically on the H-2B visa process. And we're proceeding with that on a small scale to see if we can get some foreign workers that will agree to work beyond the August 15th date, because come August 15th, we lose all of our college employees back to school. So we're proceeding with getting the proper approvals necessary and all the steps needed. And they indicated in order for us to have somebody here by April or May, we need to start now.
I can't believe
It's
we
a
can't
petition.
find somebody in Nantucket, maybe a high school graduate that's looking for a job.
A high school
Can we hire someone year-round to do this?
We've had people come from the school to work program from the high school. And in fact, we still have one, but he leaves to go back to college in the middle of August. He's attending Embry-Riddle right now. We've had college kids from Michigan, from New York. We've reached out to the Florida FBOs. We have another lead on some potential workers in Puerto Rico that apparently have indicated a willingness to be able to stay longer. We desperately need to get as many as we can to stay through September and possibly even October.
But then we don't need them in November, December, January.
No, but, and the good thing about this type of visa, and don't quote me on this, but I believe you're allowed to be in the country up to 9 months, then you have to return to your home country for 3 months. So what we do with some employees, we keep them on the payroll, and we'll bring them back for Columbus Day weekend, for Stroll weekend, for Thanksgiving, if we need a couple of workers. So that's what we're trying to accomplish with that. And the other item under personnel, we had our first meeting today with the union to establish ground rules, as well as they submitted their proposal, and we just went through and clarified what exactly it is that they are looking for. And we have a follow-up meeting, I believe it's December 13th, if I'm not mistaken, to continue or begin negotiations. Before I go on to stats, any questions on any of that? Okay. On statistics, the operations continue to decline again. A lot of that has to do with the lack of island air service. And for the month, they're down 4.5, almost 4.6%. Year-to-date, 5.5%. The employments are down as well, 19.8 for August. Year-to-date, 9%. And again, this is a reason Retrix should turn some of this around, as well as Island Shuttle, so we're hoping to get that back in. You can see Retrix carried 9 people, but that was one flight, I think, in September. So we're waiting to see how they do with the rest of it. Actually, I've got to double check that number. That doesn't seem quite right.
Is anybody flying Retrix? Do they have any business?
Well, at the introductory fairs, their planes were pretty full.
Updates.
I've asked NOAA to do an analysis on two things. One is the seasonal service, comparing apples to apples because of the change in the size of the aircraft as well as some of the new destinations. So to take that out and look at it, you know, individually by market share, look at the health of the market as well as the, if you will, the overall possible profitability. The other thing I've asked him to look at is the Retrix operation in terms of the introductory fare period versus, you know, post-introductory, and see what happens there and what it looks like. But I think as they grow into the market, as Island Shuttle comes in, you know, we'll start seeing some of that turnaround, but right now we're still seeing declines. There are some, I picked up some errors right before I came over here. There's some numbers that don't jive. In one slide, it says Delta did so many enplanements, another it had another. And here, for example, you're seeing a 14% increase in enplanements. So I haven't been able to get to the bottom of that. I've talked to David, who is unavailable this evening, he's sick. So that doesn't jive with the prior one that says there was a decline. I have to verify which is right and, you know, where the errors are. So I apologize, but we'll look into that. In the Boston market, Cape Air is down 8%. JetBlue was up 14% for September. The DCA market, JetBlue was down 1%, and American was up 39%. Again, 39% is a good increase, but what we're looking at, or trying to look at in detail here is they put on a larger airplane, so does that 39% enough to cover or make it a profitable run with the larger airplane? You know, 39% looks great, but the load factor is at 66%. So we want to just kind of do a quick health check of, you know, what's happening there. So that's the DCA market. New Bedford is up 10%, which they've been down the prior 3 months, so that's a good turn. Not a lot of people, but still going up. Westchester is down on Cape Air, 22%. I think some of that has to do with some of the other operators in that market. The Hyannis market, Cape Air, up 19%. Nantucket Air, up 39%. And then in JFK, JetBlue is up 27%. And Delta did not fly in September to Kennedy. The Vineyard, down 25%. Again, sounds like a high percentage, but we're talking a difference of a handful of people here. So, on the jet fuel for September, it was down 2.3%. Year to date, up 1.2%. For October, you went too fast here, Janine. October, it's up 3.5%. So that's a good little bump in October. On the avgas side, we're seeing for September it was up 11.6, year-to-date up 7.8, and in October it continued to climb, it was up significantly, 29.6%, from 8,500 to 11,000 gallons. So we're pumping some avgas, and we're recovering some of that business that we had lost previously. And again, the primary generator for that would be Cape Air. So we're getting some of that business back, and that's good. Freight continues to drop. Again, we had a lot of discussions this evening. We want to try to turn that around, but down 34% for the month, 36% year-to-date, and we need to get that back. Noise complaints, same as last year, 14, and NOAA has a detailed report as to each complaint, the numbers and what happened. You can see 8 of them were from 6 residents regarding an IFR and so on. So, questions? Comments?
Nope.
And that's my report.
Next, we have the 2017 commission meeting dates. Does anybody have any immediate concerns with what's been proposed? Essentially, the second Tuesday of every month, as has been our past practice. It looks like without exception.
Looks good.
FYI, I won't be here in February.
Good for you.
Send us a
Well, the rest of us will be here on
Valentine's Day.
Valentine's Day.
Yeah. My son.
How nice. I would just mention, you had mentioned possibly the 30th for a workshop meeting.
And again, if, I said workshop, it could
Or
be considered a
commission
subcommittee.
I
The
don't-
only reason I say is because, like I say, the finance subcommittee is the entire commission, so.
I have the Conservation Commission meets on that day, so I'll be in a meeting with them from 4 to 7 anyway. So
Okay,
you know, I can do early.
we'll do our best
What's the
to,
day before that? What's the date?
I'll send out a few dates.
Just,
Yeah.
I just thought, so you know that one, I have to be there for those hours. Subcommittee reports, I think we already covered engineering, which actually wasn't a subcommittee, I think that was just a contract review committee
Yep.
type. Any other subcommittee reports?
No, we had a tenant meeting in between, I think, since our last.
yes, we did.
Did we?
I apologize, I meant to put that on the
Went Very
agenda.
well, and that's when Jason from Rectrix indicated the nice fares that we were all able to take advantage of.
Yeah, that was how we were informed, and just all came out all at once. and,
Rush
you know.
to Rectrix.
But I think there was a lot of good communication at the
Yes.
tenant meeting. There were a lot of questions and things answered, so it was good attendance and good line of communications. And I think a lot of them are going to be very happy once we get this new public address system.
Any commissioners' comments?
Well, I've been approached by a couple of people. They say there's no trash barrels when you're actually leaving the terminal or we're going into the terminal, and they felt that was rather, there should be something outside
At the main entrance,
at the main entrance. That's what they said. I'm only repeating them.
I looked shocked because I looked at them and said they were disgusting, but,
Well, you know.
because we put in a budget for new ones.
Solar you know, I mean, they have those alternatives.
Yeah, no, I'll look into that.
And then the other one was from a taxi driver who doesn't understand why the taxis cannot go closer now that 9/11 or whatever the reason was. There's a whole lot of area that they're not using in that alley, you know, in the lane that they go for their taxis. There's like 2 can go and then there's 2.
Then there's a
coming
space.
back.
I don't know that was for 9/11 or security. I think that's more for deliveries and things, because there's a lot of traffic in there with regard to deliveries for the
Okay.
restaurant and others.
So that's a good explanation. That's the only.
Janine knows the answer.
When we allowed more in the line, and one of them gets called to go somewhere else, that means 5 cars have to back up to let them out. So
Okay.
that's why we only restricted them to 2 in the front and 2 in the back.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I must say, we lost a cab driver recently, too.
Yes, I was
Who
going
was
to mention that too, Town
Yeah.
Landry.
was a very good service provider at the airport. I think he'll be desperately missed, but it was a shock to everyone.
Funeral on Saturday.
Did you?
Heck of a nice guy.
Yeah. I miss him.
Now, did the
Being in the
other
line.
coach, Tom Landry, die also?
Pardon me?
Did the other coach, Tom Landry, of football fame, did he die
I
also?
think he died a long time ago.
Okay, because I mean, that was the thing, and so somebody said, no, it's the coach, so. And not the coach, the.
No, his name
Not
was
the
Tom
real
Landers,
coach.
They called him coach.
That's
I know
why,
it is,
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
That's what I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Any other commissioner comments?
Coach Landry died in 2000.
Oh, okay. Well, they were waiting
Oh, we
my
missed that.
time.
Janine,
Yes?
could you remind us, please, about the open meeting law training, what the dates are of that?
I did not bring it with me, but I believe it's either the 22nd or 23rd.
Yeah.
Oh, the 21st and 22nd.
Monday and Tuesday. Yeah, I have it in my packet. The whole-
I think the session on the first day is in the afternoon timeframe, and the session on the second day is a morning timeframe. Both May and I are going, and I think they were expecting at least one representative from the commission.
Where is this?
I'm going to try and go on the 21st, or the 22nd, rather.
Okay.
I know I have it down in my book, but I don't know.
I'll re-forward it tomorrow.
It's in my book. I need to figure out how to put it on my calendar, on my phone.
I had one comment. I had let Noah know this, and I don't know if the other commissioners received or not, but I didn't receive an alert for
No,
the.
no, I did not.
Yes, there, okay.
As long as you're on
I'm
that.
glad you brought that up. We have a critique of the accident Thursday or tomorrow? I think it's Thursday afternoon.
It's Thursday.
We got to the bottom of that, There were, I believe it was 6 or 7 people that did not receive the alert. It was not the system's problem. It's very ironic, but an employee, just prior to the event, said, I haven't been through this system lately. I'm going to go in and, familiarize myself with it. Well, they accidentally hit a button that would, very innocuous, looked like it was fine and everything, but it changed the group setting of who received that alert. So we performed tests, we talked to the company, we did all that. We have that, we believe, ironed out now. And I apologize, but trust me, it was critical. Thank God it
Well, there's been
wasn't.
a test run subsequently, which I got the alert from. Did everybody else?
No?
I'm not sure.
No,
I got
We-
one not too long ago, just as a test.
I didn't.
And that's, again, where they got to the bottom of the error, I think, but I'll verify again. I think there's 31 people on the callback list.
Thank you.
Yeah, I did get that one.
Okay? But trust me, that is part of the critique.
Good, thanks.
Because I was surprised when I read it in the paper and thinking, oh, I didn't get notice of that.
Sorry.
As long as you've got it worked out.
Nice.
Thanks. Any other commissioner comments?
No.
Any public comment? Hearing none, we would entertain a motion to go into executive session per Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21A, to review the executive session minutes enumerated on the agenda. Clause 6, to consider purchase, exchange, release of real value property with respect to Exhibit A that would have, open session would have a detrimental effect on the negotiation position of the airport. Item C, Clause 3 and 6, consider purchase, exchange, lease value of real property, discuss pending litigation of Gatto versus the town. Also would have a open session that may have a detrimental effect on the negotiation or litigation position of the commission. And D, Clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to pending litigation regarding the closure of Island Airlines, which open session may have a detrimental effect on the litigation position of the airport commission. Not to return to open session, is there such a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All those in favor, Commissioner Buscarin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Totten?
Aye.
Commissioner Blazer?
Aye.
Chairman Drake?
I
And I vote aye as well. Thank you. Oh, no, this one, thank you, you saved me.